November 14th, 1944. The Hürtgen forest, Germany. The trees here don't stand like soldiers. They lurch, twisted and blackened by artillery, their branches reaching down like skeletal fingers grasping for earth they'll never touch again. The ground is a porridge of mud and pine needles, soaked through with rain that hasn't stopped falling for 6 days. Everything smells of wet wood, cordite, and something else, something sweet and rotten that Sergeant First Class Frank Mitchell has learned not to think about too carefully. Mitchell crouches in a crater that used to be a German foxhole, studying the forest ahead through field glasses slick with moisture. 38 years old, which makes him ancient by infantry standards. Most of the boys in his platoon weren't born when he was learning to hunt white-tailed deer in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. Those skills, tracking, reading terrain, understanding how animals and men move through landscape, those skills have kept him alive through North Africa, Sicily, and now this green hell where trees outnumber the living. The Hürtgen forest has been eating American divisions whole since September. The 9th Infantry Division, shredded. The 28th Infantry Division, decimated. Now Mitchell's unit, Company E of the 4th Infantry Division, is grinding through these woods at the cost of men measured not in casualties, but in entire squads that simply cease to exist. Yesterday, a German 88mm shell turned 2nd Squad into a pink mist and scattered equipment. This morning, 3rd Squad walked into a minefield. Mitchell heard the screams but couldn't see the men through the trees. Couldn't help them. Nobody could. The orders are simple, insane. Keep pushing east. Take the next pillbox. Take the next ridge. Take the next clearing. The brass back at division headquarters, comfortable in their requisitioned buildings with hot coffee and dry uniforms. They look at maps and see open ground. They don't see what Mitchell sees. A forest specifically designed by some malevolent geometry to kill Americans, interlocking fields of fire, pre-sighted artillery coordinates, mines everywhere, and Germans who have been here for months, who know every tree and trail, who have turned this forest into a killing machine. Mitchell lowers the field glasses and wipes rain from his face, with a hand that hasn't been truly clean since October. His platoon, what's left of it, 17 men from an original 42. They're scattered in shell holes and behind blown trees in a rough defensive perimeter. They're supposed to be probing forward, locating enemy positions, securing a jumping-off point for the battalion's next attack. But Mitchell has been doing this long enough to know when orders disconnect from reality. He's been watching the trail ahead, what the Germans call a Waldweg, a forest path, for 3 hours now. In that time, he's counted 12 German soldiers using it. Not combat troops moving to new positions, but rear echelon personnel, supply runners with canvas packs, a medic with a Red Cross armband, 2 soldiers carrying a stretcher with what looked like radio equipment. They're moving with the casual confidence of men who believe they're safe behind their own lines. That trail connects 2 parts of the German defensive network. Mitchell has been mapping it in his head, marking the patterns. Every 45 to 50 minutes, someone uses that trail, always heading east, deeper into the German-held forest, toward what intelligence suggests is a battalion aid station and supply depot. The trail runs through a natural bottleneck, where the forest closes in on both sides. forcing anyone using it to pass through a gap perhaps 20 yards wide. In West Virginia, when Mitchell was 16, he and his father used to set trap lines for foxes and coyotes. You didn't just put a trap anywhere. You read the land. You found the places where animals had to go, where the terrain funneled them naturally. You set your trap there, and you waited. Mitchell looks at that trail, at that bottleneck, and he sees a trap line, a perfect place to capture or kill Germans using a path they've been conditioned to think is safe. The problem is, setting up an ambush without authorization from company command is a court-martial offense. The problem is, his orders are to probe forward, not to establish independent operations. The problem is, there are 17 men left in his platoon, and they're exhausted and scared, and this morning Private Kowalski started crying and couldn't stop until the medic gave him something that made him sleep sitting up against a tree. But the other problem, the bigger problem, is that this opportunity won't last. The Germans will eventually realize Americans have pushed this far forward. They'll adjust their routes, reinforce their positions, or simply stop using that trail. War is filled with moments that exist once and never again. Mitchell has learned that the difference between surviving and dying in combat often comes down to recognizing those moments and having the courage to act on them. He slides back down into the crater and gathers his squad leaders. Corporal Davies, 22, from Philadelphia, whose hands shake when they're not holding a weapon. Private First Class Hernandez, 19, from Texas, who still writes letters home every day, even though mail hasn't caught up with the company in 2 weeks. Sergeant Thomas, 31, from Georgia, who was a mechanic before the war and has an engineer's mind for how things work, how they break, and how to make them work again. Mitchell keeps his voice low, barely above a whisper. Sound carries strangely in the forest, sometimes muffled by trees, sometimes amplified in unexpected ways. He describes what he's observed: the trail, the patterns of German movement, the bottleneck, the opportunity. Davies asked the obvious question: do we have authorization? Mitchell meets his eyes. No, we don't. And if we request it, by the time it comes through, if it comes through, the opportunity will be gone. Thomas asks the next obvious question: what if this goes wrong? What if we're disobeying orders? Mitchell has thought about this, has been thinking about little else for the past hour. He knows the regulations. He knows what happens to soldiers who take independent action without proper authorization. He also knows that in 15 years of military service, he's learned one fundamental truth about war. The men who survive are the ones who adapt, who think, who refuse to be passive victims of circumstances. But he doesn't say any of that. Instead, he says, we have orders to probe enemy positions and disrupt their operations. That's what this is. We'll report it up the chain as a reconnaissance in force after the fact. If it succeeds, nobody will care that we didn't wait for permission. If it fails, I'll take full responsibility. Hernandez, who rarely speaks in these meetings, says quietly, how many Germans you think we can take out? Mitchell shakes his head. We're not trying to kill them, not primarily. We're trying to capture prisoners, intelligence, maps, documents, orders. That's worth more than body count. But if they resist, then yes, we'll do what's necessary. The plan forms quickly. Mitchell has run ambushes before, in North Africa, in Sicily. The principles don't change. You need concealment, clear fields of fire, and a quick escape route in case things go wrong. The bottleneck on the trail provides the first two. The third is trickier in the Hürtgen forest, where every direction looks the same, and getting lost can be as fatal as getting shot. They'll use two fire teams positioned on opposite sides of the trail, creating a crossfire that will catch anyone in the kill zone. Mitchell will position himself with a third fire team slightly behind, blocking retreat back toward German lines. They'll use white phosphorus, grenades for smoke and confusion, not fragmentation grenades that would kill indiscriminately. The goal is to shock and overwhelm, to create a moment of such complete surprise that surrender becomes the only logical option. Resources are limited. Mitchell's platoon has 3 Browning automatic rifles, standard issue for every infantry squad. They have grenades, both fragmentation and white phosphorus. They have M1 Garand rifles, tough and reliable even in the mud. They have no heavy weapons, no machine guns, no bazookas. What they have is experience, desperation, and men who have learned to function while terrified. The movement to the ambush site takes 90 minutes. Mitchell spaces his men carefully, maintaining intervals even though every instinct screams to cluster together in the hostile forest. They move slowly, testing each step for mines, freezing when sounds carry through the trees. At one point, they hear German voices, close, perhaps 50 yards away. Everyone drops and waits. The voices fade. They continue. The bottleneck is exactly as Mitchell observed through his field glasses. 2 massive fallen trees on either side of the trail, their root balls torn from the earth by artillery, creating natural walls that funnel traffic through a narrow gap. The trees themselves provide cover for the ambush teams. Mitchell positions Davies and 4 men on the north side, Hernandez and 3 men on the south. Thomas and the remaining men, Mitchell's reserve force, take position 20 yards behind the kill zone. They dig in as much as possible in the limited time available, scraping shallow rifle pits behind the fallen trees, clearing fields of fire. Each man knows his sector, knows where to shoot and where not to shoot to avoid hitting friendly forces on the opposite side of the trail. Mitchell checks his watch. It's been 37 minutes since he observed the last German using this trail. If the pattern holds, and patterns are never certain in war, the next person should appear within 10 to 15 minutes. The wait is always the hardest part. Combat, when it comes, is almost a relief because at least you're doing something. But waiting, knowing that violence is coming but not knowing exactly when or how, that's where fear lives. Mitchell watches his men. Davies is gripping his bar too tightly. Hernandez is breathing too fast. Thomas has gone completely still, which Mitchell recognizes as his way of managing fear, shutting down everything except what's immediately necessary. Mitchell forces himself to breathe slowly, deeply. He thinks about his wife back in West Virginia, about the letter he wrote yesterday but hasn't sent because mail isn't going out. He thinks about his father, dead 10 years now, and wonders what the old man would say about this decision. Probably something about how you can't second-guess yourself once you're committed. How doubt kills faster than bullets. 11 minutes pass. Then Mitchell hears it. Footsteps on the trail. Not the cautious tread of combat troops expecting contact, but the regular rhythm of men walking casually. He raises his hand, the signal for absolute silence and stillness. Every man in the ambush freezes. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes harder than necessary. 2 German soldiers come into view. Young men, maybe 20 years old, wearing the field gray uniforms of Wehrmacht infantry. They're not carrying rifles at the ready. One has his weapon slung over his shoulder. They're talking, laughing about something. They look tired and muddy, but not scared. They don't expect Americans this far forward. Mitchell lets them walk into the center of the kill zone. His hand drops. Davies opens fire first with the bar, a controlled burst that kicks up mud at the Germans' feet rather than cutting them down. The sound is enormous in the confined space of the forest. Hernandez and his team add rifle fire from the other side, again deliberately shooting low. Thomas throws a white phosphorus grenade that detonates between the 2 Germans, enveloping them in thick white smoke and burning particles. Mitchell is already moving forward, shouting in the limited German he learned from a phrase book. Hände hoch, hands up, nicht schießen, don't shoot. The 2 Germans are on the ground, blinded by smoke, deafened by gunfire. One is screaming, the other has his hands over his head, already surrendering. Mitchell's men are on them in seconds, dragging them out of the smoke, patting them down for weapons. Davies finds a Walther P-38 pistol on one, a folding knife on the other. No documents, no maps. Just scared young men who 30 seconds ago thought they were safely behind their own lines. Mitchell has perhaps 3 minutes before every German within a half-mile investigates the gunfire. He makes split-second decisions. Thomas, take these 2 back to our lines. Use the route we came in on. Davies, Hernandez, reset positions. Anyone else comes down this trail in the next 10 minutes, we take them too. It's a gamble. The smart move would be to pull out now with their captures and call it a success. But Mitchell's instincts are screaming that there's more here, that the Germans' casual use of this trail means something bigger is happening. If they can capture more prisoners, get better intelligence, the risk might be worth it. 8 minutes pass. Mitchell is about to order withdrawal when he hears something different on the trail. An engine, a vehicle. That shouldn't be possible. The Hürtgen forest is supposed to be impassable for vehicles. The mud, the fallen trees, the cratered ground. But Mitchell can definitely hear an engine, and it's getting closer. What comes around the bend in the trail is a Kubelwagen, the German equivalent of a jeep. It's moving slowly, carefully navigating the ruts and obstacles. There are 3 men inside, the driver, another soldier in the passenger seat, and in the back, an officer. Mitchell can see the insignia on his collar, even at this distance. A captain, or maybe a major. This is beyond anything Mitchell planned for. Officers carry maps, orders, intelligence that could be invaluable, but a vehicle also means potential for escape, for a longer firefight, for things to go catastrophically wrong. Mitchell makes the decision in the half-second he has. He signals Davies. The bar opens up, not at the men, but at the vehicle's engine block. The heavy .30 caliber rounds punch through the thin metal. The engine seizes with a grinding shriek. The Kubelwagen lurches to a stop. The 3 Germans are already bailing out, but they're in the kill zone, surrounded, and before any of them can bring their weapons to bear, they're engulfed in white phosphorus smoke from Hernandez's position. Mitchell is moving forward again, shouting in German, and this time there's no resistance. The officer, a Hauptmann, a captain, throws down his pistol immediately. His hands go up. The other 2 follow his example. Mitchell's heart is hammering so hard that he can feel it in his throat. This is working. Against all probability, this unauthorized, desperate gamble is actually working. He has 5 German prisoners, including an officer, and a captured vehicle. Davies and Hernandez are already searching the prisoners. The captain is protesting in rapid German that Mitchell can't quite follow. Something about the Geneva Convention and proper treatment of prisoners. Mitchell ignores him. He's focused on what Davies is pulling from the officer's map case. Documents. Actual military documents with German typewriting and official stamps. Thomas is back, having handed off the first 2 prisoners to men from the reserve team. He looks at the scene, at the captured vehicle, at the 3 new prisoners, and his eyes go wide. "Sergeant, we need to move. Now. That gunfire, that engine. Every German in this sector knows something's happening here." Mitchell knows Thomas is right. They've pushed their luck, as far as it will go, probably farther. He gives the order. Collect everything that looks important. Disable the vehicle completely. We're moving back to our lines. 2-minute deadline. His men work with practiced efficiency born from months of combat. The Kubelwagen's distributor cap is smashed, its tires slashed. Every document from the vehicle is stuffed into packs. The 5 German prisoners are lined up, hands on heads, and moved out at double time. The withdrawal is chaos, barely contained. Mitchell keeps his men moving fast, pushing the prisoners ahead of them. Behind, he can hear German voices shouting, commands being given. Someone fires a shot, but it's wild, unaimed. They're into the trees now, following the route back, and the forest that has been their enemy for weeks suddenly becomes their ally, concealing their movement. They make it back to the platoon's original position without contact. Mitchell immediately sends runners to company headquarters with a message. Platoon has conducted reconnaissance in force. 5 prisoners captured, including 1 officer, documents seized, requesting guidance. The response comes faster than Mitchell expected. A jeep arrives 40 minutes later carrying Captain Rawlings, the company commander, and Lieutenant Colonel Henderson, the battalion executive officer. Both men look like they're trying to decide whether to award Mitchell a medal or a court-martial. Henderson interrogates the German captain personally, using the battalion's German-speaking interpreter. Whatever he learns, his expression changes from anger to intense interest. He takes Mitchell aside. "Sergeant, you understand you had no authorization for that operation. You risked your entire platoon on an independent action without clearing it through proper channels." Mitchell stands at attention. "Yes, sir. I do understand that." Henderson stares at him for a long moment. "The documents you captured, the ones from that officer, their artillery fire, plans for this entire sector, coordinates, timing, targeting, priorities. Intelligence has been trying to get this information for 2 weeks. You just handed it to us." Another pause. Then Henderson says, "I should have you up on charges. By the book, what you did was insubordination." But he doesn't continue that thought. Instead he says, "The prisoners are being sent to Division Intelligence. The documents are already being analyzed. Based on what we're seeing, we're adjusting our attack plans for tomorrow. There's a good chance you just saved American lives, Sergeant Mitchell. A lot of them." Mitchell doesn't know what to say to that, so he says nothing. Rawlings speaks up. "Sir, if I may, Sergeant Mitchell has been with this company since North Africa. He's one of the most experienced NCOs in the battalion. His judgment in the field has consistently proven sound. Henderson nods slowly. All right, here's how this goes in the official record. Platoon conducted aggressive reconnaissance, patrol, and made contact with enemy forces. 5 prisoners captured. Valuable intelligence seized. No mention of unauthorized action. No mention of operating outside established procedures. But Sergeant Mitchell, you understand me very clearly. This was a one-time exception. You do not have carte blanche to run independent operations whenever you feel like it. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. After the officers leave, Davies approaches Mitchell. He's grinning, something Mitchell hasn't seen in weeks. Sarge, you know what this means. We actually did something, not just getting chewed up for another 100 yards of trees. We actually accomplished something. Mitchell understands what Davies means. The Hürtgen forest has been a grinding, senseless meat grinder where men die for forest trails that don't appear on any map that matters. But this, 5 prisoners, captured documents, intelligence that will save lives. This feels like actual war, like their actions had meaning beyond just surviving another day. That night, Mitchell writes in the small notebook he keeps in his breast pocket, November 14th, 1944. Conducted unauthorized ambush operation. Captured 5 enemy soldiers, including officer. Seized documents. No American casualties. We'll probably never do anything this reckless again. We'll probably never have to. He doesn't write about the fear, about the moment when the Kubelwagen appeared, and he had to decide in half a second whether to engage or withdraw. He doesn't write about the ethical calculation of risking 17 men's lives on his own judgment without orders. Some things don't go in notebooks. Some things you carry differently. The intelligence from the captured documents proved as valuable as Henderson suggested. The German artillery fire plans allowed American commanders to adjust their attack routes, avoiding pre-sighted kill zones. The prisoners, particularly the captain, provided information about defensive positions, unit strengths, and supply situations. Division intelligence estimated that the information Mitchell's unauthorized ambush produced contributed to saving between 50 and 80 American lives in subsequent operations. But the Hürtgen forest continued to consume men. Company E, which had entered the forest with 187 men, would finish the campaign with 43 effectives. Mitchell survived, though he took shrapnel from an 88mm airburst on November 27th that put him in a hospital for 3 weeks. By the time he returned to duty, Company E had been pulled out of the Hürtgen and refitted with replacements who had never known the veterans Mitchell had served with. The ambush itself became something of a legend within the battalion. The story got told, retold, and embellished with each telling. In some versions, Mitchell captured 10 Germans. In others, he single-handedly stopped a German counterattack. The truth was simpler and perhaps more important. A veteran sergeant looked at a tactical opportunity, made a decision that technically violated regulations, and executed an operation that succeeded because he understood terrain, timing, and the patterns of human behavior that persist even in war. The question of whether Mitchell's action was justified remained complicated. Military discipline exists for good reasons. Unauthorized operations can lead to disaster, to friendly fire incidents, to units becoming separated and destroyed in detail. The chain of command exists because war is chaos, and someone needs to maintain order and strategic coherence. Mitchell broke that chain, violated that order, because he believed the tactical situation demanded it. Was he right? The successful outcome suggests yes, but outcome-based ethics are dangerous in military operations. If the ambush had failed, if Americans had been killed or captured, if the Germans had responded with overwhelming force, Mitchell's decision would look very different in retrospect. War is filled with bold actions that succeeded through luck as much as planning, and with cautious decisions that prevented disasters nobody ever knew were possible. What Mitchell proved, perhaps, was something the military has always known but struggles to institutionalize. That rigid adherence to procedure can be as dangerous as reckless independence. That good soldiers need to be able to think, to adapt, to recognize when the situation has changed faster than orders can update. The trick is having soldiers like Mitchell, experienced enough to know the difference between opportunity and foolishness, skilled enough to execute when they decide to act. After the war, Mitchell returned to West Virginia. He worked as a hunting guide in the Monongahela National Forest, teaching people the same skills his father had taught him. Reading terrain, understanding how animals move, recognizing patterns in nature. He rarely talked about the war, except to say that the forests of West Virginia were kinder than the ones in Germany. In 1974, Mitchell received a letter from a man named Joseph Kessler, who had tracked him down through military records. Kessler had been the German captain captured in Mitchell's ambush. He wrote that he had spent the remainder of the war in a prisoner-of-war camp in Mississippi, that he had returned to Germany in 1946, and that he had spent the decade since wondering about the American sergeant who had captured him without killing him. Kessler's letter described his memory of that day, the sudden eruption of gunfire, the smoke, the shouted German commands. He wrote that in that moment he had been certain he was about to die, that American infantry in the Hürtgen forest were known for not taking prisoners, for shooting first and sorting out details later. But Mitchell's men had fired to capture, not to kill. They had handled prisoners correctly, even in the chaos of potential German response. Kessler wanted to thank Mitchell for that, for conducting war with discipline and humanity, even in circumstances that justified neither. He wanted Mitchell to know that he had returned to his family, that he had children and grandchildren who existed because an American sergeant had chosen capture over killing when either option was defensible. Mitchell wrote back. His reply was brief. He said that he had been a soldier doing a job, that he took no special pride in having captured rather than killed enemy personnel, and that war created enough death without soldiers adding to it unnecessarily. He wished Kessler well and hoped he had found peace after the war. They corresponded sporadically for another 15 years until Kessler's death in 1989. In one letter, Kessler asked Mitchell if he ever regretted the unauthorized ambush, if he ever thought about how differently things could have gone. Mitchell's response was characteristic. He wrote that regret was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. You made decisions with the information and time available. You lived with the consequences, and you moved forward. Anything else was paralysis. Frank Mitchell died in 1997 at the age of 91. His obituary in the local paper mentioned his military service, but not the specifics. It noted he had been awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart, that he had served with distinction in 3 campaigns. It did not mention the unauthorized ambush in the Hürtgen forest, the captured documents, or the German officer who remembered him across 50 years and an ocean. The tactical lessons of Mitchell's ambush were never formally incorporated into Army doctrine, but they influenced how small unit leaders thought about independent action. The balance between following orders and adapting to circumstances is one of the eternal tensions in military leadership. Mitchell's example suggested that good soldiers needed permission to think, to assess, to act within their areas of responsibility, even when specific authorization wasn't available. In modern military training, instructors sometimes use historical examples to illustrate principles of mission command, the philosophy that subordinate leaders should be empowered to achieve their commander's intent through whatever means the tactical situation requires. Mitchell's ambush, though unknown to most of these instructors, represents that principle in action. A sergeant who understood his commander's objective, disrupting enemy operations and gathering intelligence, and who found a way to achieve that objective even without explicit permission. The unauthorized ambush in the Hürtgen forest matters not because it was particularly large or decisive in the strategic sense. 5 prisoners and some documents did not change the course of the war. But it matters because it represents something important about how wars are actually fought and won, not just through grand strategies and massive operations, but through countless small decisions made by soldiers who refuse to be passive, who see opportunities and find the courage to act on them. Mitchell built his trap without permission because he understood that in war, as in hunting, the perfect opportunity comes rarely and passes quickly. You can wait for authorization and watch it disappear, or you can act and deal with the consequences later. He chose to act, and for one day in November 1944, in a forest that was eating men whole, that choice made a difference. The trees in the Hürtgen forest today are tall and green, 3rd or 4th generation growth replacing the ones destroyed in 1944. Tourists hike the trails, mostly unaware of what happened there 80 years ago. The Bottleneck where Mitchell positioned his ambush is gone, erased by time and new growth. But the lesson remains that sometimes the most important actions in war are the ones nobody authorized, conducted by soldiers who understood that regulations serve objectives, not the other way around. Thank you for listening to this story from World War II. These accounts of real soldiers making real decisions under impossible circumstances, they deserve to be remembered and understood. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We're committed to bringing you these forgotten moments of history, the individual choices that shaped the war in ways grand strategy never captured. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from, what part of the world you call home. Share any stories from your own family's history, any accounts of relatives who served in World War II or other conflicts. Your family's stories matter too, and we'd be honored to hear them. If there are specific events, battles, or aspects of World War II history you'd like us to explore in future episodes, let us know. This channel exists because you care about preserving these memories. about understanding war not as abstract history, but as the lived experience of real people making hard choices. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for ensuring that soldiers like Frank Mitchell and the thousands like him who made decisions without fanfare or official recognition are not forgotten. Subscribe, comment, share these stories. That's how we keep history alive.